Okay, let's talk about PvP, wargaming, and Dungeons and Dragons. PvP in D&D really happens most of the time when you have a clash, right? Most of the time, it's somebody is acting in a way that doesn't work with the game overall. Now, sometimes it can be a friendly clash. Usually you don't have to worry about that, but the idea of PvP, it's somewhere you start, it's not where you end, because you're looking to fix whatever the divide is. And the divide cannot be extreme, and if a player is pushing towards the extreme, or both players push towards the extreme, there's a personal clash that is going on beyond the game. At that point, you should be sorting out the personal clash, because that is a real life conflict playing itself out in the game. If there's no real conflict, it will be light to begin with, and the idea is to move from PvP to non-PvP, to let the conflict play out, but in a reasonable way. That can be fun with the right people, but in reality, it's really rare that two people that get along get to that stage. So the vast majority of the time, it's a real conflict. Either somebody is poorly behaving, or there is a real life conflict between two people that is playing out in the game. And you need to realize that before you think it's something else. On rare occasions, people have been convinced that, open PvP between players in a certain way is okay. And then they'll play it out, but they don't realize the type of PvP that they're being open to is the type that would only usually show up when two people have a real clash. And when you go that hard at it, you go from not having a clash to creating one. You'll notice it happens quite often when you finally open the door thinking, PvP is okay. What people don't realize is light PvP, very light PvP, like, soft verbal disagreement, but for the most part, people still get along. That type of PvP is okay. Real serious PvP means if it's not something you were talked into, it just means one person is either poorly behaving overall, or the two people that are part of the PvP have a real life conflict that they might not be aware of right away. And that goes beyond the game, so you don't want that kind of PvP, even though that is going to be the majority of the player versus player or character versus character gimmick going on. That's a negative for the experience. You want the light friction that should be there to color up a story. Something where two people wouldn't go beyond a fist fight with their characters. They just wouldn't. They wouldn't be pushed there. That's the type of light friction PvP you're looking for, because it just means that the two people, even though they see their characters as having some conflict, they personally don't. That's why it remains light. Only when it becomes a serious issue do you get a more extreme version of it. Now imagine, again, some people being told that the more extreme PvP should be acceptable. And what do you see happen if they try to play it out? It creates real life conflict. Now, I seen a post recently, a female game master or dungeon master who runs a WotC edition D&D game, runs it with a war game layered on top. Now, her conflict here, her issue here is nobody seems to want to play the sort of evil type of character in the conflict, or in the game, because they think everyone else will hate them and gang up on them. And what she doesn't realize is that is not wrong. There is something that D&D is doing, Dungeons and Dragons, especially with the WotC editions. It is manipulating you. And WotC understands this better than TSR, but TSR was doing it. But WotC understands a deeper level of human behavior. Yeah, and they want you to play the game together, to get along. They want to cut the friction down. There is manipulating devices in there that are not clear to anyone running or playing the game. And they don't have to be, because they assume that you're running as a group and that you're against the bad guy. And the idea of the bad guy is everyone aims, to oppose that person. It's okay to hate the bad guy. And you're being manipulated towards this point of view. So it cuts down on friction and keeps people playing the game better for the sake of peace, for the sake of achieving what the game wants. It's understanding human behavior and then putting it in there in minute ways that somebody without a higher education will never understand and never know. And in some cases, that was happening with TSR D&D, but even the guys doing it don't realize they're putting in they're planting seeds, right, that are going to mess with your mind. Now, what would happen here? You would assume no one wants to play the bad role because, well, it might happen in real life. Well, you now represent the bad guy. First off, yes, all the good people might start looking at you in a certain way, right? But it's like mentally not being aware that you start seeing that person in a certain light. And now when you get into the game, it's easier to say, we should all be against this person. And so now that person as an individual, how good are they at the game? They're going to worry. They're going to notice the attention they can get. And yeah, people will want to look to take out the bad guy because that is naturally what you do in Dungeons and Dragons, and the game is manipulating you towards that. So is a player wrong to think they'll be ganged up on? No. Is the game planting seeds and manipulating people to do exactly that? Yes. Are the other players playing the good characters most likely going to be manipulated to do exactly that? So the game becomes almost unfair for the person that's willing to take on the evil role in the game. Yes. Now, regardless of the good roles, she said she had another issue, which is she has all these trigger attempts, pushes, obvious stuff in there to create conflict between the player characters to have war, because she's layered a war game on top of D&D. Well, if you don't know the history of wargaming in Dungeons and Dragons, D&D, out of almost every tabletop role-playing game out there, has the weakest lean into wargaming when it comes to its roots than most other games. So it only leaned slightly into wargaming, and then quickly went far away. By AD&D 1E, the wargaming roots are barely existing. Barely there. And in the WotC editions, to say that they're there is to not understand, right? You could see 4th edition as leaning more towards miniature gameplay, the structure of fighting, but still far away from actual wargaming roots. Not even trying to be that. I can take you back to a game like Traveller. Traveller is more wargaming than D&D ever will be. That was made by a wargamer, like many of the side games. See, if you go back to the old school, a lot of these little games were made by wargamers because they felt like D&D did not really live up to what they were looking for. And they were not wrong. TSR realized early on, as they started working on Beckme and everything else, the vast majority of the people coming in to play D&D were not wargamers. And sadly, as much as Gary wanted it to appeal to wargamers en masse, the vast majority, rejected Dungeons and Dragons. You can have people around the hobby want to live in a fantasy and tell you D&D is wargaming. They can say it all day, but the reality just doesn't play out. So when you go to try to actually enforce wargaming with Dungeons and Dragons, especially with the WotC editions, it's going to backfire. Because they're using things you don't even know in the game. They understand human behavior at a high level. And there's seeds in there. There's things that will not be obvious to the person playing the game or running it if they don't have higher education on this stuff. It's seeds being planted to work together, not have conflict, to avoid most of the PvP. Right? So here you have two things clashing against each other. You want war for the wargaming aspect you put on top, but you have a game that says don't clash, don't clash, don't clash, and we're planting seeds and manipulating the players to make sure they will not clash. And then you got a DM going, I wonder why they won't clash. You'd have an easier time taking a lot of side games that were made by actual wargamers back in the old school, for example, and trying to put a layer of wargaming on that to create the wargaming you're looking for. Here would be my advice if you want to pull it off. Not saying the game works well with wargaming at all, but my advice to that female game master, DM, dungeon master, whatever term she'd like to use, is to have NPCs be the enemies they go to war with. Simple as that. Like, just stop playing against the WotC team play. Because it's in there in a way that you can't understand and you can't overcome it. So if you're wondering why it's not happening, this is why. The easiest way to maybe create the situational war is for you, DM, to play the role of the evil. Not the players, you. You play the role of something for them to fight. Attack, and do what a DM does. The DM plays the role of the villain, of the monster, of the bad guy. You don't need players playing that role against each other. That PvP aspect should be light friction. Light friction doesn't lead to wars. So that's why it's not happening, and you got a game that is manipulating your players to make sure it likely will never happen. And even if it does happen, and you get to an extreme clash, it will probably make real life personal issues come to light, or even create personal issues that weren't there beforehand. Now, if you want to create conflict between people in real life, go ahead and push for the PvP war, the people versus each other thing. Go ahead and do that, but I say it's not good for you and the people you game with. Right? So how about you do what a DM is meant to do? Always play the role of the person they are supposed to be adverse to be against. That's what you do. Stop getting the players, I hate to say it this way, stop trying to get players to do your job for you. You are the bad guy. You are many things, but if there is a bad guy, it's you, Dungeon Master, not them. It's your job to play the role of the villain. Your job, not your players. So do your job. That would be my advice. And then you'll get your war without needing to create conflict between players. And stop trying to do that in a game where conflict between players, if it is healthy, it starts light and goes away. Here's a good example of PvP that I would say works. Go to a show, I think it's like Quark and Odo from Deep Space Nine. Right? There's two characters, Quark and Odo from Deep Space Nine. That's PvP. That's the kind of PvP you want. Right? Go watch it, you'll get what I mean right away. Maybe you watch some stuff, you can see what their relationship is like, which is not even one at the start. It is a clash, but one that's reasonable friction that sooner or later goes away. You start at PvP, you end with the friction going away. That's the aim with PvP. If you have two people wanting to kill each other, well, and that has to get fixed in some extreme way, or doesn't get fixed at all, that is likely one of the players is going too far, right? That means that's beyond the game. That's an issue now in real life with that person. Or both people have such an issue with each other that the issue really is more in life, and you're not helping them by playing it out that way in a game. You are harming the people, you're harming someone, or you're enhancing an abusive person in the game as they use your game to abuse another person. And that now is a real life issue. So when you see that, don't think it's normal and don't allow it to happen. That's either someone who has now taken things beyond the game and abusing people in your game, through your game, and using your game to do that. Or two people have a major conflict. Now, if you get people that don't start with a major conflict, don't allow them into extreme PvP, because then it will create the conflict. That extreme PvP is only there to represent major conflict, and if you allow two people without it to play that out, it creates real life conflict. So you want that Odo and Cork light friction PvP, and in the long run, you're looking for that to die down as a bonding happens. Remember, they're team players in Dungeons and Dragons. You're looking to get along, so over time, that goes away. It's like, look at Raceland in Dragonlance, the wizard. He starts off hating his brothers and the other people. He's an evil character. But what happens, even though there's light friction, over time he bonds with people, even though he's twisted. He bonds even with his brother who loves him. And at one point, he even saves the group. An evil character that should not do that, does that. And why? Because you start with PvP, and you're aiming away from it through bonding, through love, through working together. That's real PvP. That level of PvP can lead to a fist fight. But the reason the players would only go that far is they actually don't hate each other. There's no real life conflict being played out, right? So, and even then, most likely, though, I've never really seen a real life couple players really get to the point where they're willing to even play out the fist fight in any serious way. The conflict is light because they don't have a real life issue. When you see major conflict, that always says something in real life is bad. And that's not the intent of these games. The intent of these games is for us to come together, socialize, and have fun. When you allow real life conflict, either from an asshole or two people that really have an issue with each other to play out, that's not good. And when you carelessly think that that's acceptable and take two people at peace with each other and get them to play out extreme PvP, you're creating real life conflict. Don't do it. So, first off, D&D is not made for wargaming, but the way you're going to achieve it, if you're going to get anywhere with this at all, you need to do what a proper DM would do. You're the villain, you're the bad guy. Don't get the players to do it, you do it, and you'll get your war. Even though it shouldn't even be necessary. But hey, you do what you want. I'm just telling you my take on it. D&D is not the wargaming game people have said it is. It simply isn't. And that's just the facts back me up. It's not a difference in opinion. There's no vague thing. Factually, it's not a war game. Traveler is more of a wargaming mindset game than D&D, because wargaming is not about fighting, right? I mean, that happens. It's about strategy and simulation of the real, right? So, in a way, the wargaming mindset can even play itself out in social interaction, because it's all about simulating the real. And if social interaction in a game is simulating the real, and you use it as strategy before you ever get into conflict, that's more of a wargaming mindset than anything Dungeons and Dragons is doing. Okay, there you go.